Today's guest is Professor Marlene Dobkin de Rios, author of, amongst many books and articles on psychedelic drugs, A Hallucinogenic Tea Laced in Controversy, Ayahuasca in the Amazon and the United States. Today we discuss ayahuasca tourism, neo-shamanism, and the future of psychedelic studies. What impact do the tourists to South America in seek of ayahuasca have on the cultures there? Are drug tourists hurting themselves and the indigenous cultures? What dangers do ayahuasca tourists place themselves in? Dr. Marlene Dobkin de Rios is a medical anthropologist and licensed psychotherapist. She has a BA in psychology from Queens College of the City of New York, an MA in anthropology from New York University, and a PhD in medical anthropology from the University of California at Riverside. Her area of specialization as a researcher has been hallucinogens and culture. She is the author of several hundred scholarly articles and book chapters, including two recent works, A Hallucinogenic Tea Laced in Controversy, printed by Prager in 2008, and a forthcoming autobiography, The Hallucinogenic Journey of Dr. Marlene Dobkin de Rios, 45 Years with Shamans, Ayahuasqueros, and Ethnobotanists, to be published in October 2009 by Inner Traditions. Dr. de Rios conducted fieldwork in the Peruvian Amazon and coast with the União do Vegetal, or UDV, Church in Brazil. She has worked with ayahuasca healers in urban Peru and intensely with one healer, Don Hilde, who lived in Pucallpa, Peru. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Her recent work has been focused on what we can learn from shamanic healing, and she has applied that knowledge to work with Latino clients in psychotherapy. Visit her website at www.marlenedobkinderios.com. And here's my interview with Marlene Dobkin de Rios. Enjoy the show. Marlene, how are you doing this morning?
Fine, thank you.
Are you ready to get the interview underway?
Yes, certainly.
All right. Would you like to discuss your educational background?
Well, my name is Marlene Dobkin de Rios, and I have a bachelor's from Queens College in New York in psychology. I have a MA in anthropology from New York University, a PhD in medical anthropology from University of California, Riverside, and a postdoctoral year at UC, University of California, San Francisco, in the medical anthropology program.
And how did you get into anthropology?
Well, as I remember, I was very interested in social work, actually, and those were taught in departments of sociology, and I didn't do any undergraduate training in anthropology. I think I took just one course at the very end. And then as I started looking into the sociology department, it was the early 1960s, and a lot of African nations were becoming independent. It was kind of an exciting time. So I guess I slipped into anthropology just in terms of looking to continue my education.
And you also teach psychiatry at UC Irvine, or?
Yeah, I'm an associate clinical professor of psychiatry at UC Irvine. I think that was your question, right? What my role was there, and I do a lecture series once a year for the psychiatry residents and fellows, mostly on my second area of interest, which is Latino mental health.
And how has your double major benefited your studies?
Well, anthropology is the study of group behavior, while psychology tends to focus on the individual. So you kind of get all the bases covered when you do both. But within anthropology, anthropology is the study of humankind. As a result, you can have economic anthropology, you can have medical anthropology, psychological anthropology, whatever you want to study is grist for the mill.
How did you get interested in studying the indigenous use of plants?
Well, I was looking around for a PhD dissertation topic. I had finished my graduate work at NYU for the PhD, And socially, I was invited to a dinner, and I met, it was actually a psychiatrist who grew up in Iquitos, and on his honeymoon, he took his wife to ayahuasca sessions, and it was very romantic, people having diarrhea and vomiting in the bushes. Not supposed to laugh at your own jokes, right? So he was, at the time, up in Canada at McGill, and he was doing some forensic psychiatry training, and he wanted to go back and study ayahuasca. This was in the early 1960s. So he was told there at their transcultural psychiatry group that he needed an anthropologist. I needed a topic for my dissertation. He needed somebody to look at the sociocultural end of things. And so we collaborated and got funding to go off to the Amazon. So it really was his project.
In your opinion, why has the understanding of entheogens been underplayed in the study of ancient cultures?
Well, if you go back to the 60s, you had Timothy Leary at Harvard, who was doing some pretty criminal kind of things, caused a lot of fallout, I think, and people just were very nervous that somebody as brilliant as Leary, as well trained, as established, and so on, could, quote, go off the deep end. So I think it just put a pale over everything. In fact, subsequently, there was somebody at Harvard who had studied the Kung Bushmen in Africa, and he didn't even bother to talk about entheogen use in the culture because it was politically incorrect, even though Schultes had written me that this group was using powerful plant hallucinogens. So there was just a kind of a climate, I guess you would say, where people stayed away from the notion that their people didn't use drugs. In fact, some of my studies on the Maya were like that. In 1974, when I first published on the Maya, ancient Maya use of drugs, plant hallucinogens, there was a total denial by some very major scholars in the area. And then subsequently, it was found that there were psychedelics used, and it must have been a terrible shock for these folks.
Yeah, I suppose back at that time, I guess today we really have from the anthropology perspective, and I've talked to a number of anthropologists about this, and they just, if you're not including drugs in the study of a culture, you're missing a lot of the culture's history, and that the more I look in this field, the more and more that seems to be true, and certainly your earlier book, Hallucinogens, A Cross-Cultural Perspective, makes that pretty clear too, I think.
Yes, there's a lot of data that was not hard to find, that was sitting there waiting to be culled, and related to the other aspects of culture.
Let me go off topic for a second. What cultures do we know of that don't use any form of drugs?
Well, I'm not, I could give you names, but then there might be data that would just change everything.
Well, I know they used to think that the Aborigines didn't use any sort of plant drugs, and then you published that, in fact, they did.
Yeah, there's very good data on that. I remember in the 70s interviewing a famous anthropologist who had worked many years earlier with Australian Aboriginal peoples. And as early as the early 50s, 1952, I think it was, the use of the paturi, is the plant that was used by the Aborigines, was no longer around. But there had been some historical data that the Lutheran missionaries bought up a crop one year, and then they used that to lure the Aborigines to their mission stations.